and welcome to TheAIbumMan. And for my first review of 2014, I wanted to cover a new band, something new and exciting. And here we have what I think is a great example of that and what is set to possibly be, and yeah, this is a big statement only a couple of weeks in January, but this could well be on my album of the year list, possibly top 10, top 20 when it comes to the end of the year. This album is that good. So the Vintage Caravan, if you don't know, they are a three-piece Icelandic sort of retro rock 70s band on the M.A.R.S.W.A.T.T label. And Voyage, I believe this is their second studio album, and I believe it was also commercially released maybe 1 or 2 years ago, or something, only in Iceland. It was only on an Icelandic label, available in Iceland. This is the first time any of these songs have been available outside of Iceland, which is very cool. So I count this as a new album, I do. I count this as a 2014 release. And the band consists of, and these are going to be hard to say, Oscar Logi on guitar vocals, how to say the drummer's name, Guo John Reynissen on drums, I'm just going to refer to him as the drummer, and Alex Orn on bass. And yeah, so this album is certainly their major label debut, so it'll be interesting to see how such a young band, as all the members are only in their sort of early 20s, late teens, something like that, and how they stack up against other bands on the Nuclear Blast label with that sort of type of retro rock stuff, like a Graveyard, Scorpion Child, Orchid, Blues Pills, that type of stuff. And as well as the plethora of other 70s-esque acts that are around at the moment, like Rival Sons, St. Jude, Monster Truck. So do they add a unique flair to what is becoming a crowded and at times stale subgenre? Or are they just left standing by the wayside? Well, Craving, and the track list will be in the description below if you want a visual of it. So the first track, anyway, it's Craving, and this sets the tone for the album from the outset as just an all-out, balls-to-the-wall rock and roll album with that classic 70s vibe present in the tone and style of Oscar's playing. And straight off the bat, it's a little reminiscent to me of the band Graveyard, as Oscar's voice is a little reminiscent to that guy who I can never remember the name of, which is quite bad because I love Graveyard. And the riffs on this particular song aren't too dissimilar, but even with some similarities, this song still kicks ass and takes names with a catchy chorus. And Oscar really begins to showcase his guitar skills with a nice little solo, and it whets your appetite for the greater solos on the album. It's nice, it's not an amazing one, but he definitely shows himself to be one hell of a guitarist later on, but we'll get on to that. This is definitely a great start to the album, and gets you interested, gets you engaged. And then we have Let Me Be. This has that same classic retro vibe as the previous song, but here I detect a bit of stoner rock even, which is nice. I always like a good bit of stoner rock. And yeah, so that's nice. It works very well with this type of music. It's not overbearing, it's just nice and subtle at times. And Oscar, I think, really begins to showcase his vocals here. It sounds stronger, more powerful, and just more present than it was on Craving. And has a slightly gravelier tone to it, which I really think works to this song's benefit. Though I wouldn't say his voice is honestly, quite as strong as others in this retro rock subgenre. It certainly does the job well, and yeah, but the highlight of this band really to me is the musicianship, but we'll come back to that as well a little bit later. Now, the very interesting song, Do You Remember? And this song is quite different to almost everything else on the album. It's a really heartfelt ballad. I mean, all albums of this style tend to have a ballad around the 3-4 track mark, but what distinguishes this from the pack is just that while other bands it can feel obligatory or dialed in, this just feels so genuine, so heartfelt. Oscar really seems to mean every word, and the beautiful lead melodies as well really adds an extra dimension of atmosphere, with the solo being a perfect fit to the song. Not too basic, not too overcomplicated, but it's just stripped back, it fits the atmosphere perfectly, and yeah, it definitely works in a song of this ilk. And I love how just unashamed this song is to be a ballad. It doesn't try and break out, doesn't have some jarring heavy section just for the sake of it because they didn't really want to do a ballad. They just get into it, it just seamlessly flows and takes you on a little journey. And speaking of journeys, without having expand your mind, this is the main single of the album, the song that introduced me to the band with their really trippy as hell music video full of magic mushrooms and all that type of, stuff, let's say. And this track it has my favourite riff on the album. If it's my favourite track, I'm not quite sure. I think my favourite track is probably a bit later on. But, oh my god, this riff, it really drives the song, and I get a bit of that early bluesy Sabbath to it when the song really kicks into gear, and Oscar telling you to take a trip, and yeah, this song really does take you just on a trip. Not only is it very melodic and a great single, but coming in at 7 minutes on the full album version is some of the best, most impressive instrumentation and musicianship on the album. I said that this was my favourite aspect of the band, and this song really proves why. Well, this band creates some nice melodies and lyrics, and Oscar has a good voice. Other bands such as Graveyard and Rival Sons do that type of short, catchier songs a bit better, I'm honestly going to say. But musically, oh wow, musically these guys can compete with anyone, and especially considering their age. They play as well as seasoned veterans, creating some of the most interesting grooves and diverse range of playing, especially shown in this song. And after it suddenly stops, and then you get this lovely little section with a picked melody, and the song completely changes pace just for a little bit. And as I said, while others focus on short, catchier songs, these guys, especially on a major label debut, to focus on expanding the sound as well as, of course, your minds by throwing out twists and turns in many of the songs and then return to the main groove, also highlighting the different band members of Alex's bass and the brilliantly accompanied by the drummer, who's, as I said, the name I really can't say. And this mixture of tempo and stylistic changes combined with the catchy choruses and riffs just make this band stick out as one of the stars of the retro revival scene, and hopefully a band that's going someplace. And they certainly don't let up with M.A.R.S.W.A.T.T. There's lots of dots between it, so seeing as I say, I probably maybe stands for something, but I don't know what it does. And this song has a groove so killer that I'd be impressed if I had ZZ Top the Masters a groove play it. And this again slightly graveyard-esque song, features one of the strongest choruses on the album, if not the strongest, which is definitely helped out by the production, which I'd like to talk about. So I was only able to listen to a low-quality stream on SoundCloud, unfortunately. I mean, I certainly eventually want to pick up this album. I don't have the money at the moment, but eventually I will. And what I can have, the mix, it seems appropriate with the bass being nice and high in the mix, which is nice, always helps with groove-driven albums like this. Mix up for the lack of second guitar, as well as Alex's bass rate is just pretty fantastic, especially where he gets a couple of solo spots to shine. And the drums, they have a nice crisp sound to them, and the guitars, I really like the guitar tone here. They have that old school tone, but they still feel modern. It's not completely retro, it doesn't feel quite analog, but it definitely has an older vibe to them. And yeah, the producer's done a great job, really pushing this band, getting the best out of them and getting a nice sound. Definitely don't really have any qualms with the production qualities or mix. Cocaine Sally. Now this is a fun little song. I mean, any song that has a chorus of Cocaine Sally walks the streets alone, that's going to be a pretty cool song, and it is. This is one of those that I imagine live would be amazing. I mean, it still works in the studio, but I can imagine it just needs that kick, that live energy to really give it that driving immediacy and life to it. But it's still, it's definitely a very enjoyable song. I just think that live this would go from an enjoyable song to a blow your mind type song. And now Winterland, this is such an odd track on the album. It really, really is. So the beginning of this track gives me a real sort of Planet Caravan vibe, the Sabbath song from Paranoid, of course. And while a lot of these bands do, have a lot of Planet Caravan sort of clones and rip-offs, I wouldn't say this is. To me, this has a very distinct vibe, and it incorporates their, classic sort of hard rock sound with some sort of stuff that reminds me of sort of the late psychedelic movement, bands such as 13th Floor Elevator, the UK Nirvana and the Pretty Things, that type of thing. It definitely reminds me of that in places. And this song is definitely one of the best on the albums. And the reason to me is really because the wonderful change in the middle, when they just show their skills, not just as musicians, but just as instrumental songwriters. And as this bass-driven section has quite a different feel before then the main melody comes in and Oscar plays this stunning little solo. It's very different, very atmospheric, and really quite genius. Now the second single from this album is next, and that's Midnight Meditation, and this really goes back to their roots with some hard rocking, drive-in, frenetic hard rock. And this song, it's a lovely continuation of their sound, which features some killer vocals and a nice chorus. Again, I've praised the band for this before, but I will continue that, you know, this could easily have been a 2.5–3 minute song, but instead they throw in a little bass solo, they have a slowed down bridge, and it just adds this extra dynamic, this extra bit of originality and creativity in what is becoming quite a stale subgenre, and it's just a breath of fresh air, this music, and really the shot to the arm that this needed in the beginning of 2014 if it was going to maintain its relevancy. And then, when you think they've given all they've got, they've shown all their tricks, you get King's Voyage. You know, this is not a track to be underestimated by any means. Coming in at 12 minutes, and the atmosphere they built at the beginning really threw me off a bit. I almost expected the guy from Sigur Rós to suddenly start coming in with a guitar and cello. It was so atmospheric and sort of just odd noises. But instead, actually, they go in quite a Sabbathy direction, I would say, and this definitely reminds me of a debut album, Bluesy Sabbath, though don't take that as me saying this is yet another, you know, doomy Sabbath song from a band of this ilk. No. This is more of a hard rock, has a really spontaneous element to it, which is one of the things, because the first Sabbath record, one of the best things about that is just the spontaneity, the jamming vibe to this, and this really has that, and it just fuses a lot of those elements together, and almost prog at times with its sudden changes and shifts in musical focus. It just, as I said, it has the feeling of a jam session, but yet still feels like a coherent, driven song instead of needlessly meandering into the void, which some prog can, you know, get into and get a bit self-indulgent, but this doesn't. It feels concise, but yet it's 12 minutes long. And then at about 5:45, you think it's ended, and then it really starts to become really trippy. I mean, seriously trippy. It feels like you're on bloody magic mushrooms as they incorporate various effects and techniques with the vocals and guitars. I mean, damn, it's all the time, but it's great to see such experimentation, and you know, on a big label debut like that, that's definitely something to respect. God damn, I see many experienced bands afraid to throw something out there, but this band, they really don't hold anything back, and it's just a genuine epic, King's Voyage, worthy of every rock fan's attention. So if you want to check out this album, what would I recommend? I'd recommend Expand Your Mind and King's Voyage, and if you don't like those two songs, then you're either deaf or you're just not a fan of this, you know, type of music, and, you know, fair dues. But I really do implore you to not let this one slip under the radar just because you haven't heard of them or you've read that, oh, they're just another 70s rock type band. Means, you know, you're missing out on something truly special. They take that Purple-esque, Zeppelin-esque formula, you know, Sabbathy formula, and they really add something of their own to it and create some truly special, interesting, almost experimental hard rock that combines high energy, ridiculously catchy melodies and some of the tightest musicianship and best chemistry you hear all year in hard rock, most likely. I'm going to start the year by giving this album, and yeah, I didn't think, considering how long it took me to give a rating this high, this album is a 9 out of 10, and I do not give that rating lightly. This to me just delivers pretty much everything I could ask for, but the only reason why doesn't it get a bit higher, why doesn't it hit 10? Well, there's still room for this band to grow and improve, definitely. This is not a perfect album, and at times, you know, only small times, but at times I feel it, you know, starts to adhere to some of the more conventions of this genre a little bit too much and a little bit too closely. But when they really just go all out, go into their own direction, that's when this band excels, and that's why I find this album so enjoyable. So yeah, 9 out of 10. This has been TheAIbumMan. Thanks for watching. Comment, rate, subscribe, and as usual, long live rock and roll.